All right, Allie, thank you for that. Inflation is affecting more than just everyday purchases like gas and groceries. It's also causing some people to reconsider their retirement plans, whether it will be current workers or recent retirees. For more on all of this, joining us now in studio, Ryan Dennehy, a principal at California Financial Advisors in San Ramon. Thanks for being with us. I keep hearing conversations. Do I fill the gas tank? Or do I take my family out to dinner? Are you hearing that more and more out there?
It's a great question and one that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
More and more, it really depends on everybody's financial situation. But when it comes to the decision between going on vacations or being able to put food on the table or driving to work, the question or the answer is very simple. We are recommending for clients to pull back on some of the discretionary expenses if they don't have the disposable cash to spend.
So let's talk about your specific clients here. I'll ask you about retirees, versus non-retirees, or maybe people who are thinking about retiring in the next coming years. What's that number one piece of advice you're giving people who have just recently retired?
Budgeting. Making sure that they know where the money is going, what they are spending their funds on, and making sure that they have a strong defensive barrier. Anybody who has gone through the retirement process or is thinking of retiring in the next couple of years needs to have enough in their portfolios that is outside of market exposure in order to ride out what could be coming down the pipe.
So what's the biggest mistake, though? When you see maybe a client go, no, we're not doing this, you cannot do this, what would that be?
The biggest mistake is underestimating their expenses. Most people, they don't know how much they spend. It's one of the most I would say, strenuous exercises that we do with clients when they're first coming on board. The first thing is we have them go through all of their expenses, line item by line item, and that is a very eye-opening experience for most people.
I was just thinking, that happened to me the other day, just subscriptions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there's Netflix, there's Disney, and it just starts adding up.
Absolutely. Every time there's a new subscription service, that's another $10 to $12 per month, and all of a sudden you're paying more than you were for cable before you switched.
Yeah. What about someone who is considering retirement right now? How do you treat that client differently than someone who has just retired?
Somebody who is planning for retirement right now, the biggest difference that we're doing is adjusting our inflation expectations. Before the pandemic and really before this inflationary period, we would always overestimate what we thought inflation would be. We would run with a 4% inflation rate even when it was at 2%, just to leave a little bit of buffer room. Now we're seriously considering looking at long-term inflation rates in clients' financial plans of 5 to 6%, at least for the next 5 to 10 years.
I was going to ask you how many, 5 to 10 years?
5 to 10 years.
Now
that's not to say that that's where we expect inflation to be. We always like to be more conservative than where we're expecting. So if we plan for a 5 to 6 inflation rate and it ends up being 4, great. We've overestimated. People have a little bit more cash in their pocket than we were expecting, and they can go on vacations once inflation drops back down.
Do you feel that more and more people are struggling here to save, and not just because of inflation now, but really over the past couple of years because of the pandemic?
Yes, to a certain extent. I think the last 3 years, anybody who had money invested in the market happened to benefit from a strong recovery period, especially if they did not pull out or panic when COVID first hit and the market took a dip. Anybody who was able to ride through that period or buy in March when things were looking very grim, March of 2020, they were severely rewarded for putting that money at risk in the market. So on one end, we have people who had money in the market. They are now in a much better position to be able to ride out this inflationary period. For people that didn't have money in the market, that were living more paycheck to paycheck, it is definitely a more difficult situation to be looking at right now.
It's difficult. I almost feel like you used to say it's year to year, but now I feel like it's almost like week to week. You never know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
All right, Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, when it comes to inflation, it does appear that it is going to get worse before it gets better. I know we're expecting some economic data on Wednesday of this week coming out for the month of March. Inflation figures probably going to be about 8.2%, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little higher due to the Russian and Ukraine conflict.
All right. Ryan Dennehy, California Financial Advisors. Appreciate the time, the conversation. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll send it back to you, Sal.
All right. Thank you, Mike.